Welcome to Presence, How to Live and Lead Consciously for August 12th. It's funny, I start out saying good afternoon, but it's good morning where you are and who knows where the other viewers are. So
good evening, Julie, wherever you are, yes.
So this is my co-host, Holly Duckworth. I'm Ravi Tangri, and this is our weekly show on how can you bring, there's a lot of interest and a lot of growth and exploration in expanding consciously, expanding spiritually. How do we take that from concept and from meditation into our lives, into the boardroom, to actually be able to live from that place?
And we're learning it and living it every day, aren't we, Ravi? Every day is another opportunity to wake up to yourself and your highest and best a little bit. We have a fun show planned today. The show is titled How to Live, How to Access Your Intuition. How to access your intuition. And Ravi and I have said this show came kind of as a bolt of intuition for both of us. We've both been looking to do a show. Ravi had a little show. I had dabbled in having a show for a while. And intuition is really a key fundamental concept that students of spirituality, of leadership and consciousness want to dabble in, want to play with a little bit. So I like to start the show kind of thinking about what do these spiritual concepts, oh look, somebody's calling me. Their intuitive hit was to visit during the middle of the show. So it's probably just, another viewer, right? They want to call in and join us. So intuition, what is intuition? In the land of some of these concepts that can get a little big and ethereal, let's break it down for you. And what we've learned, Ravi and I, this week is intuition is defined as the ability to understand something immediately, that you don't need to go to conscious, you don't have to go to your head with the reasoning, that knowing that you know, and you cannot unknow it. All of these words date back to Middle English, and it's from the Latin intuere, or to consider. And so I think as Ravi and I have explored our own intuitive practices, it's given us an opportunity to consider where do we live and lead from our head and data, and how do we tap into this knowing beyond the knowing, that thing that we just know, and that comes again from the Latin to consider.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, okay. I think that the to consider is really appropriate, because as we were shaping the show, I put out on Facebook to ask people for input, and one of the comments that came up, and a number of people, I think this is a concern, is they say, well, my intuition has actually had a pretty good track record, but I didn't listen to it. So it's not just how to access it. A lot of times we do, but it's trusting it. So it's to consider what the intuition is giving us and say, do we follow or not? And that's part of what we want to explore is, do you trust it? And if so, how do you build your trust for that? And I think one of the things, there's a lot of different names for intuition. Sometimes people talk about go and listen to your heart, a gut feeling. It can be a very quiet voice or feeling sometimes. And other times it's sort of like, I used to be big comic book fan, still love movies, but Spider Sense, where you see Spider-Man, he goes, all of a sudden this alarm goes off. And I've had that as well as a quiet one as well. There's many different ways, and we'll explore that about what the different types mean. And a couple of things have often been attributed to intuition. One is that comes from experience. If you do something for many years, you get to know the essence of it. You don't have to think what makes it up. You get a feeling. Malcolm Gladwell, in one of his recent books, talked about expertise comes from doing something for 10,000 hours. And people say, well, once you've got that experience, you intuitively know what that is going on. And that's perhaps one form of intuition. I think what we're talking about is something that comes beyond that, something where you get this knowing, this, what was the definition? This ability to understand something immediately without having that experience, without having all of that experience that contributes to it.
Yeah, I think the key is the balance of both. Like for me, that 10,000 hours thing, it actually becomes more of a head knowledge thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you could use the example of, brushing your teeth. All of us, since we were little kids in America, we learned, how to do it. It's intuitive. It's instinctive. We just do it the way we do it. And for this show, we wanted to talk about that intuition beyond, that time when you're in the car and suddenly you hear turn left or you feel turn left. And you turn left and you realize that you've just bypassed an accident. That type of experience.
Absolutely.
Practice, play with these concepts personally and certainly in business. One of the ways that I've used intuition in my business is I'll actually, sit in quiet or sit in meditation, and I'll just, who am I to serve today? What's my work today? And then I'll get an intuitive hit, move to the funeral industry or move to the hospitality industry. And then, I'll keep listening to that. And then it'll be amazing. In my life, I'll meet somebody who's an executive director of this association or organization. And if I hadn't been actively cultivating my intuitive listening, my intuitive feelings, then maybe I would have missed some of those synchronicities.
Right. Another way that's come to me, as you mentioned that, is sometimes I'm trying to work on something, but it's just so hard. Either my brain is mush, or shiny, I go somewhere else, and I just can't focus. And to me, that's my intuition also saying, this is not what to focus on. And, the things that come easy, that's where I should focus. And so that's another way. For example, for me, I've learned to read my own intuition with it. And, I've had a lot of years of exploring what my intuition says, and literally it saved my life in 2-3 occasions. So I'm pretty solid on it, but I invested the time to prove it to myself. And that's something I encourage you to do as well, to prove whether or not this works.
So, Ravi, one of the questions we were exploring together was this idea of, is intuition a natural gift, or is this something that we have to learn? What's your take on that?
I think it's a natural gift. I think a lot of people unlearn it. And it's just like there's research that shows that virtually every kid at age 5 is incredibly creative. By the time they come through our school system, which is very left brain driven, and not meaning to diss teachers, but it's the way the system is. It's left brain driven. If you read the book 7 Kinds of Smart, there's 7, now 8 types of intelligence with emotional intelligence, and the school system is geared at one of them, very left brain. And by the time they come through that, only 3, 4, 5% are creative. In the same way, I think we're very intuitive, but it's not logical. It's not, if you will, rational. So we're taught to unlearn it and to not trust it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's just interesting to think about as parents. The show's also on living with intuition. How can we help our children in our life cultivate their own intuition? I remember being a little girl and dancing in the backyard, and now what I would call intuition came through me, that I was supposed to be on a stage and that I enjoyed being on the stage and being in the lights and having that experience. But certainly over time, societal norms, social consciousness said, it's not appropriate for you to be on the stage. And so my whole life career evolved and changed, because at that time I didn't have the skills to listen to that intuition and certainly activate that within the adults that influenced my life. And I don't dish that in any way, but I think it's a great example of how kids, are we listening to the innate wisdom of children? And that's children of all ages. Mm-hmm.
And it's also, if this is about, the show is about leadership as well. It's about bringing consciousness into all of our lives. If you look at in a leadership role, the best definition I've ever heard of management is making irreversible decisions with inadequate information. Okay, you never have all the information. You cannot know it's right. And there's actually research that shows that the best leaders, the way they make decisions is they go through, they analyze the situation, or analyze, as I often put it, and they think of different scenarios, and then in their mind they go through like 1,000 different what if scenarios, and they pick the one that feels right. So they go with that gut feeling of what feels right. So what that is, it's not an either or with logic or intuition. It's a both and. How can you use logic and intuition hand in hand? You do the analysis and so on without going into the analysis paralysis or the analyzing too much. But then there's never enough information to guarantee that this is the right path. That's where the intuitive part comes in, to where you get that feeling. And that's what the best leaders do, is they've got all these, in their mind, they go very rapidly through these what if scenarios, and they go with what intuitively gut feel is the right way to go.
It's such a natural way of living for me that I couldn't live any other way. It's little decisions and it's big decisions, but I guess it has come from deep, intensive practice. I mean, it's silly things, here's a daily example that many of us, you go to the grocery store and you look at the rack of the oranges, or, the tomatoes, which one do you pick up? Well, for me, as funny as that sounds, it's not a head analyzing thing. It's like, okay, this one visually feels like it's supposed to come home with me, kind of thing. And that's, as we become conscious and awake people, we can take little micro examples of that, start bringing more intuition into our lives. A couple of weeks ago, I woke up on a Saturday. Oh, I'm going to go to the farmer's market. I had no clue where my agenda was going, but I let my intuition guide me, and I was able to have great conversations with the farmers and the artisans and people there, and brought home some great produce that I ended up forgetting that I had a party that night, and I was able to make a great big watermelon and mint salad from all these great fresh herbs. And it was all because I just kept saying yes and showing up, and yes and showing up. So follow that when you hear it, when you feel it, as a conscious being out there in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's important to grow your confidence with it by starting with small things and see, okay, does this work? And whether you follow it or not, notice what happens. And that we'll get into when we get into our tips, because there's a lot of stuff we want to get into, both in terms of how do you access the intuition, but also how do you learn to trust it? And I think that's equally important. A lot of times it's this whole issue in our left brain world, our left brain conditioning. We feel we need to be able to control it. And the reality is we've got very little in our world that's controllable. We like to delude ourselves into thinking that we control things, but really there's very little that we really, really control. And it's a matter of learning to trust that flow, right?
I have a line you probably heard me say before. It is as it is. Mm-hmm. And that is, it is as it is when it's going the way I think it should go, and it is as it is when life is going the way I don't think it should go. As you know, I got stuck in the Delta Airlines loving service interruption, I think is what they're calling it now. This week. I got to spend 12 hours in the various stages of airports, and in that moment, we have sort of a choice. Do we, go to that human wrestly side, or do you go to that spiritual conscious side that says, okay, spirit, you have a better plan for me, and what does that look like, and how do I literally evolve in the moment? I think that as an intuitive being, if you're going to allow more intuition, the control piece, and on some level, almost the human attachment to time. Still got home. Mm-hmm. Still got home that night. Didn't look the way I thought it would look. But I was able to meet some new people in a restaurant, read a great book, have a great chat with my mom that I probably wouldn't have had if I just been on that traditional flow of this is what my life is going to look like. So that's another opportunity of a time if your life is changing or evolving, or you have a quick moment. okay, I'm gonna just let me practice this thing Holly and Ravi were talking about. Let's ask my intuition, what's the highest and best for me? That question,
Yeah.
what's the highest and best for me in this moment? And then do that little thing.
Yeah, in those times where things are not working out, where you know what you want is not going to happen, you got two choices. You can either get totally ticked off and get frustrated that it's not working, but say, oh, or you can say, okay, somehow this is not working. Like I've had situations where things just work out so badly, it's not possible to be that bad. It cannot be, and yet it does. So I'm going, okay, what's the message here? What is the opportunity? What else is possible? And really, that's a much deeper concept that we'll probably hit on another show, but it's trusting that somehow the universe is helping us go to where we need to go with our highest path, right? It's not necessarily where we want to go in the moment, but it's usually where we need to go. And there's a matter of trusting the universe in that, and that takes a while to feel comfortable with that.
The idea of control versus influence.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can lean into our intuition and allow it to influence us. I believe it actually empowers me more than the controlling mindset that so often actually limits my view. You know me, Ravi, it's another show, it's another book. I'm reading this one right now, The Corporate Mystic. And it's a guidebook for visionaries with their feet on the ground. And I think as we look at living and leading in conscious times, we have to be willing to, I just opened to a page. I just love it. I love it when intuition is guiding me to say this. Page 91, when I pray, miracles happen. When I don't, they don't. You know, and we'll do another show probably on prayer. There's lots of different ways to do that. But that intuitive asking of the universe for that which you most desire, and that awareness that intuitively this world wants what we want, and bringing more of that goodness in is really, really key. And intuition is a whole chapter. Leadership by calling forth your full potential.
Mm-hmm. And you know, that's a huge concept for a lot of people. So, you know, as I say, that's probably you're right. That's probably a different show, to trust that the universe is there for us, because that's not the experience a lot of people have, or their perception of experience. So that, you know, I think that's going to warrant a whole different show or two or three to explore. But we probably should start moving into some of our tips for this week, right? I'm just keeping an eye on time here to make sure that we get the material in here. So you wanted to talk about one thing, Holly, about how to distinguish between, for a lot of people, what's fear and what's intuition, right?
Fear. I'm working on a concept right now. Ego, edge good out, edge God out, versus ego, expanded good opening, expanded God opening. And I think if you're going to be a student of consciousness, it's an exciting time to say, is that little voice inside my head negative or is it positive? And in my frame of spirituality and conscious living, I believe that all things are for my good. So I have to look at those voices that I'm judging, that I'm labeling as bad, and say, wait, how could this expand me? Bring more compassion, bring more love into my experience. And I had the opportunity to do that for hours and hours in the Atlanta airport this week, because there was something expanding and emerging that I didn't know was possible. So listening to that fear voice, because man, let me tell you, when I got off that plane and I realized that my flight was canceled, that fear of I'm going to be stuck here in Atlanta with no hotel room all night long, it was real. And yet I had to step into that good, positive, expanding good opportunity to say, how am I going to expand more good in my intuitive life right now? And funny thing, I said to the guy at the counter after they rebooked me on a flight, where's the best restaurants? And he said, go to Terminal E. And I'm coming to find out, I think that's the international terminal. Got all the way down there. I'm like, there's absolutely no way my flight's going to be going out of this terminal. I'm going to have to, finish my meal an hour early and go track to T or A or whatever. And I was sitting there and I'm like, okay, intuitive hit, Mom, I got to get off the phone. Time to go find my flight. Check the gate monitor. The gate that I went out of was 2 gates away from where I was at. I couldn't have planned that. And intuition is about opening yourself up to a greater plan. Let go of the fear that coulda, shoulda, woulda, not going to happen, and step into this faithful place of, okay, my body, my inner knower knows what's best for me.
Yeah. And for me, it's, I come at this as a scientist, right? I want to prove or disprove, and that's what I did for me. And I think this applies both in distinguishing what's fear and what's intuition, and also to prove to yourself whether or not intuition works. And let me just clarify something. I know there's some doctors and scientists who poo-poo this stuff, right? And I'm going to make some rather strong comments here, but let me preface it by saying these are not judgments. These are just my observations. When they are poo-pooing this, they are not speaking as scientists and doctors. They're speaking as human beings whose frame of reality is being threatened, and they're reacting to that. It's like saying, no, the world is not round. I will not go further there because I'm going to fall off the edge. They're terrified of that. I'm very aware it's a different mindset. Okay. When I was a physicist, I used to teach some pre-med students in the physics class. I used to tutor them, and they are taught in a very methodical, deterministic left brain way, and to memorize and so on. And the concepts that I was working with them, they could not handle basic university first year calculus. They had to break it down and add squares under a curve instead of going through a formula. They could not conceptualize in that way, because not that they weren't able to, but they've never been trained to. And so for a lot of people, if they grow up in that left brain deterministic world, they don't even realize that quantum physics is totally different from what most people learned in high school for physics. In high school, you learn, it's absolute, it's measurable. In quantum physics, it's probabilities. Your conscious intention changes the results. That fries the brains of people who only learn in a deterministic left brain world. So these people are, if they've been trained that way, it's not that they're any less or whatever, it's just what they have been trained in. It's fearful to consider a world that could not work that way, okay? A real scientist, what they do is they propose a hypothesis and they test to prove or disprove. So what I recommend is that you get a book, a log book, like a research book, and jot down everything that happens every time you have an intuitive hit, big or small, and notice what happens after, and where the feeling is, where in your body you feel it and what it is. Describe it. That way you can start to see when your intuition said a certain thing, did things work out that way, whether you followed it or not. And when it's one feeling versus another, you can start to see, is this about fear or is this about intuitions? Because they're usually separate feelings, right? When I get my spider sense going, it can be whomp. It's like, do not pass. It's so intense, it's whole body. But when I get fear, it's contracting and it's something really in here. That's for me. It's going to be totally different for everyone else. So keep this log. And that's what I did, I kept that log like a scientist. And if you can, as a scientist, if you can produce one phenomena and get the same result over and over again. And for me, it was, forget, I always say, forget 50 Shades of Gray. There wasn't one shade of gray. It was black and white. Every single time my intuition said, go this way, things worked out, even if it was the craziest, wackiest thing. And every time I didn't listen to it, caca happened. Even if I was doing the logical thing. Absolute. And literally, like I said, it saved my life. So now for me, I've proven it. So that's where you can start to keep a log and listen to and notice what happens and prove it to yourself. Don't do it because Holly or I say it. Prove to yourself. So what Holly said about separating fear from intuition, you can tie that into this as well, so that you start to understand what your body's telling you.
Yeah, and in the corporate mystic book, Ravi, it says one thing they don't teach us in school is how to listen and honor all of our feelings. It is left to life to teach us this fully. However, when we listen to the signal from our inner selves, the main message is don't lie to yourself. Lying will get you in trouble, but being honest with yourself will make you a better person.
Whoops, you just froze there for a sec.
So
there.
find
Holly, you just froze there for a sec. So you said find
your feelings and your intuition so that you're not lying to yourself, that
Cool.
you're really stepping into the truth of who you are. I think intuition is a huge tool for that.
Yeah. And then the final thing this show, I wanted to share with you a tool that I discovered. It came to me intuitively about 15 years ago, which is the simplest way I've ever found to access your intuition. And Holly, I haven't taken you through this, so you can sort of try this out as if you're a listener, right? Or a viewer. And for those of you who are watching, that's a nice thing. You can access this on this show on YouTube. You can replay it on Blab. It's also on our podcast on iTunes. So you can replay this little clip to practice it. It's called your heart voice. And what this comes from is a lot of times what dominates is our head voice, right? Chatter, 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 right? And we analyze things to death with that. So what you do, and I'm going to direct Holly through this, but if you're watching or listening, you can do this yourself. Holly, you know that internal dialogue that you got, right? You can get a sense of it now. Now, this is going to sound really weird. Don't think about the question. Just go with the first hit. And don't answer loud because it's going to be different for everyone else. But I'm going to ask you that voice, if you can get that sense of you talking to yourself in your head, first sense, where in your head is it? And just tell me when you've got a sense. And in the middle, top, left, right, front, back, you got a sense of where that is?
Yeah.
That internal dialogue? Okay. Now, this is going to sound really weird. But imagine almost like you could pull it on a piece of string. Imagine you could pull it right to the back of your head. Right? Oh, just very gently, almost like you could pull that internal dialogue to the back of your head. You notice that? And you notice this, does anything change in the quality of that?
Yeah, it feels deeper for me.
Right. Now there's a spot where your spine meets your skull. Okay. Just imagine almost like you could pull it on a piece of string down there to where your spine meets your skull and snuggle it in. There's a spot. What do you notice happens when you put it there?
I notice it feels warm and smiley. Yeah.
And is it as strong? So it's changed in quality, right? It's not that critical or whatever. Is it loud at all, or is it just a feeling?
For me, it's in terms of bright light. It went from darker to brighter.
Okay. And what that is, I have no idea why it works. The way our neurophysiology works is that spot, if you ever get overwhelmed with the internal chatter, you put it back there, your internal chatter shuts down. It cannot operate. I have no idea why, but it can't. You don't keep it there. You need it. But if you're ever going, blah, 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 and you just put it there for 5 minutes, when it comes back, it actually behaves better. So now you've moved it there. Now imagine almost like you could pull it on a piece of string. Imagine you could pull it right down pull that voice right down into your heart. And there's a place where it fits just right. Just imagine. And what may happen, a couple of things could happen there. A, if it's still a voice, it's often much quieter and much slower. And you just have to be quiet to focus on it. For some people, it's no longer a voice, it's a feeling. And what you notice as you snuggle that voice right down there?
Absolutely everything you just said, exactly the way you said it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we call the heart voice. It's a really simple, the easiest way I've ever found to access your intuition. And you just bring that, when you've got chatter, you just bring that voice down there. Research has found we've got a second brain in our bodies, in our hearts. And you snuggle this into that. And all of our words say, when we talk about intuition, what do people say? Go to your heart, listen to the quiet voice within. Well, guess what? It's that voice that normally overwhelms us here. Just bring it here and ask it questions, and then just be still and notice what works. So you can start playing with that, experimenting with it. It's just a really easy way I found to access your intuition, and that's your heart voice.
So, Ravi, this is our fifth episode of the show, and I know in an earlier show we had a tip, and it said if you want to be more conscious, go to the bathroom, and the idea was you needed to break the energy to move to another place, and as funny as this sounds, this is a great activity that if you need to get out of your head into your heart, move, go to the bathroom, and or go to your quiet place, go to your office, go for a walk, and do this energetic feeling exercise, moving that into your heart. So that's a great activity for all of us to practice, to become more aware of our feelings, our feeling nature, and how to operate at our highest and best awareness with that.
Yeah. So we are just about to the end of time here for this show, and just want to, since the Olympics are going on right now, our next week's show is going to be about vision, but how do you not just create, but how do you own your vision so it becomes like an Olympic vision that these athletes have that get them to these places where they may not otherwise have dreamed that they could get there? So how do you own, not just create, but own your Olympic vision?
We're going there. We'll have our flags. We're gonna, go Team USA. I think we're in the medal count, Ravi. I think Team USA is beating you. We should have had a little bet at the beginning of this show. We're just also giving a little preview. September, we're going to do a book club. We're going to, dedicate 1 month to each show to a book. We've got a couple of books that we're looking at right now, but we would certainly invite, if our listeners have a book that they would like us to explore, to share that with us. Holly at hollyduckworth.com, Ravi at ravitangri.com, because we're going to pick the book probably next week and share it with you all so you can get it and have it to read along with us in September.
Absolutely. And you can, of course, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can access this show. If you go to YouTube, just you'll find it on my channel there. Holly puts up the podcast on iTunes. You can subscribe it. So as soon as this show is complete, you can get the audio downloaded as a podcast. Please give us feedback by Twitter, by Facebook, so that we can make this show something that works even better for you, and in terms of living and leading more consciously. Thank you, Holly.
Yes. Have a great week.